In the sprawling hills of Los Angeles, where million-dollar mansions hide secrets behind their pristine gates, Choi Dong-hyuk woke from the same dream that had haunted him for months. The woman with warm brown skin and gentle eyes, moving through his home like she belonged there, smiling at him with a love so pure it made his chest ache. Every morning, he searched his memory for her face in real life, but she existed only in his dreams until the day his world changed forever. The dream felt different this time, more vivid, more real, as if the universe was preparing him for something extraordinary. He had no idea that downstairs, his housekeeper, Mrs. Jung, was interviewing a young woman whose life had been shattered by trauma. A brilliant mind forced into humble work by circumstances beyond her control. He had no idea that in mere hours, his dreams would walk through his front door, wearing a simple uniform, carrying cleaning supplies, and looking nothing like the powerful businessman's daughter he was supposed to marry. Some people believe in destiny, others believe in coincidence. But when Eden Carter stepped into the marble foyer of the Choi mansion that Tuesday morning, both destiny and coincidence held their breath, waiting to see which would claim credit for the love story about to unfold. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Choi mansion, casting golden patterns across the Italian marble floors that Eden Carter now found herself responsible for maintaining. She adjusted the cleaning cart's squeaky wheel and took a steadying breath, reminding herself that this job, humble as it was, represented hope. Hope for stability, hope for healing, hope for a future where her psychology degree might mean something again. "Remember, Mr. Choi is very particular about his privacy," Mrs. Young had explained during yesterday's interview, her kind eyes crinkling with concern. "He's a businessman with many, demanding clients. You clean efficiently, quietly, and if you encounter him, you bow respectfully and continue your work. He appreciates invisibility." Eden understood invisibility. She'd been practicing it for 8 months now, ever since the attack that ended her career as a trauma therapist. Ever since Dr. Diane Foster had gently suggested she take extended leave after Eden's panic attacks made it impossible to be alone with male patients. Ever since her savings ran out and her UCLA psychology degree became just expensive paper on her apartment wall. She began in the East Wing, methodically dusting the priceless Korean artifacts that spoke of old money and older traditions. Each piece told a story of heritage and honor, concepts that felt foreign in her current circumstances, but somehow comforting in their permanence. The work was meditative, allowing her mind to quiet in ways that months of therapy hadn't achieved. Eden was polishing a jade figurine when she heard footsteps on the grand staircase. Heavy, measured, confident. Her body tensed automatically, the familiar spike of adrenaline that came with unexpected male presence. She forced herself to breathe through it, focusing on the cleaning cloth in her hands. Choi Dong-hyuk descended the stairs with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to command. At 32, he possessed the kind of presence that made rooms go quiet, not from fear but from respect. His black hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit immaculate, and his dark eyes held the weight of responsibilities most people couldn't imagine. He was thinking about the morning's meetings, the delicate negotiations that required his personal attention, when movement in his peripheral vision made him pause mid-step. A woman was cleaning his artifacts with careful, reverent touches. Her dark skin seemed to glow in the morning light, and her hair was pulled back in a simple bun that revealed the elegant line of her neck. She wore the standard uniform Mrs. Jung provided, navy blue dress, white apron, but something about her posture spoke of education, of dignity that transcended circumstance. Dong-hyuk's breath caught in his throat. It was her, the woman from his dreams. Every detail was exactly as he'd seen her night after night for months. The graceful way she moved, the concentration on her face as she worked. Even the way she tilted her head slightly when focused. It was impossible, illogical, but undeniably real. Eden felt the weight of observation and turned, expecting to see Mrs. Jung checking on her work. Instead, she found herself looking up into the most intense dark eyes she'd ever encountered. The man on the staircase was staring at her with an expression she couldn't interpret. Shock, recognition, something that made her pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, bowing as Mrs. Jung had instructed. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I'll move to another room." "No," The word came out sharper than Dong Hyuk intended. Eden's eyes widened, and he saw her take an involuntary step back. He forced his voice to soften. "No, please continue. I was just surprised to see someone new." He couldn't stop staring. In his dreams, she'd always been just out of reach, a beautiful mystery that vanished with consciousness. But here she was, real and solid and even more breathtaking than his sleeping mind had conjured. Her eyes were warm brown with flecks of gold, and when she looked at him, he felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that went deeper than logic. "You're Eden Carter," he said, remembering Mrs. Jung mentioning the new hire's name. "Yes, sir." Her voice was soft but steady, professional despite the obvious nervousness. "Mrs. Jung hired me yesterday. I hope my work is satisfactory." Satisfactory. If she only knew that her mere presence had answered a question he'd been asking the universe for months. Dong Hyuk descended the remaining stairs slowly, not wanting to frighten her but unable to resist getting closer. "Where did you work before this?" he asked, genuinely curious about the woman who'd somehow existed in his dreams before existing in his life. Eden hesitated. The truth was complicated, painful, and not something she shared with employers. "I was in healthcare," she said finally, "but I needed a change." Healthcare. That explained the gentle competence he'd observed, the way she handled his possessions with care and respect. Dong Hyuk found himself wanting to know everything about her. What had brought her to his home? What had put that shadow of old pain in her beautiful eyes? What had made her trade whatever career she'd had for cleaning his floors? "And you're comfortable here?" he pressed. "Mrs. Hyung is treating you well?" The concern in his voice surprised Eden. In her experience, wealthy men didn't inquire about their domestic staff's comfort. They certainly didn't look at housekeepers with the intensity this man was directing at her. It should have frightened her, that focused attention from a powerful stranger. But somehow, it didn't. "Mrs. Jung has been very kind," Eden replied honestly. "This is a beautiful home. It's peaceful here." Peaceful. Dong Hyuk almost smiled at that. His life was many things, but peaceful wasn't typically one of them. Yet looking at Eden in his foyer, surrounded by the artifacts of his heritage, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of rightness, of completion. "Good," he said simply. "I want you to be comfortable here." Their eyes met and held for a moment that stretched longer than propriety suggested. Eden felt her breath catch, not from panic, but from something else entirely. This man, her employer, was looking at her like she mattered, like she was more than just another piece of household staff. Mrs. Jung's voice echoed from the kitchen, calling Eden's name, and the spell broke. "I should go," Eden said, gathering her cleaning supplies. "Mrs. Jung needs me." "Of course." Dong Hyuk stepped aside to let her pass, catching a hint of her scent, something clean and floral that made his head spin. "Eden?" She turned back and he saw his own confusion reflected in her eyes. This feeling, this recognition, it wasn't one-sided. "Welcome to my home," He said softly. As Eden disappeared into the kitchen, Dong Hyuk stood in his foyer, his mind reeling. The woman from his dreams was real. She was in his house, cleaning his floors, and looking at him with eyes that held secrets he desperately wanted to uncover. For the first time in months, he cancelled his morning meetings. He needed to understand what was happening to him. He needed to understand why the universe had sent him dreams of a woman he'd never met, only to place her directly in his path when he least expected it. Most of all, he needed to figure out how to make her stay. 3 weeks passed, and Dong Hyuk found himself restructuring his entire routine around Eden's presence. He'd never been a man who lingered at home. His business empire demanded constant attention, meetings that stretched from dawn to midnight. But suddenly, he discovered urgent reasons to work from his home office, important calls that required the quiet of his study, documents that simply couldn't be reviewed anywhere but his library, all excuses to catch glimpses of the woman who'd turned his ordered world upside down. Eden, for her part, was beginning to notice patterns in her employer's behavior. The man who Mrs. Jung claimed was rarely home seemed to be everywhere lately. Not intrusively, he never interfered with her work or made her uncomfortable, but his presence was constant. A shadow in her peripheral vision, the sound of his voice from the next room, the lingering scent of his cologne in spaces she entered to clean. "Mr. Choi seems to be working from home more often," she mentioned to Mrs. Jung one afternoon as they prepared lunch in the kitchen. The older woman's eyes twinkled with something that might have been amusement. Yes, he's been quite focused lately, very particular about the house being perfect. Eden didn't miss the meaningful look Mrs. Jung gave her. I hope my work has been satisfactory. Oh, child, Mrs. Jung laughed softly. Your work is more than satisfactory. I've never seen the house look better, or Mr. Choi look more interested in his surroundings. Before Eden could ask what that meant, Dong-hyuk himself appeared in the kitchen doorway. He'd abandoned his usual formal suits for dark jeans and a white button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The casual look made him seem more approachable, though no less commanding. Mrs. Jung, I'll be having lunch on the terrace today, he said. Then his eyes found Eden. Would you mind serving it out there? It wasn't really a question, and Eden nodded. Of course, sir. And Eden? His voice was softer when he addressed her directly. Please, call me Dong-hyuk. Sir makes me feel ancient. Mrs. Jung busied herself with the lunch preparations, but Eden caught her small smile. There was definitely something happening here, some shift in the household dynamics that she didn't fully understand. 20 minutes later, Eden carried the lunch tray to the terrace, her hands steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. Dong-hyuk was seated at the wrought-iron table, but he stood when she appeared, a gesture of courtesy that surprised her. Thank you, he said as she set down the tray. It looks perfect. Eden began to retreat, but his voice stopped her. Would you join me? She turned, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry? For lunch. Would you join me? Dong-hyuk gestured to the empty chair across from him. Unless you've already eaten. No, I haven't, but I couldn't. It wouldn't be appropriate. Says who? His smile was gentle, encouraging. I'm the employer here, aren't I? I think I can decide what's appropriate in my own home. Eden hesitated, torn between protocol and the undeniable pull she felt toward this man. In the 3 weeks she'd worked here, he'd been nothing but kind to her. Never condescending, never inappropriate, but always attentive, like she was someone worth noticing. I'm still wearing my uniform, she said weakly, and you look beautiful in it. The compliment hung in the air between them, simple and sincere. Eden felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from something warmer, more dangerous. One lunch, Dong-hyuk said softly. I promise I don't bite. Against her better judgment, Eden found herself sitting across from him. The terrace overlooked the mansion's gardens, where late spring flowers bloomed in carefully tended beds. It was peaceful here, removed from the chaos of the city below. Tell me about yourself, Dong-hyuk said as they began to eat. The real story, not the careful version you gave me that first day. Eden's fork paused halfway to her mouth. There's not much to tell. I doubt that. His dark eyes were patient, encouraging. You have a psychology degree from UCLA. Mrs. Jung mentioned it when she hired you. That's not exactly typical background for domestic work. So he'd been asking about her. Eden wasn't sure how that made her feel. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns. It does, he agreed, but usually there's a reason. What happened, Eden? The gentleness in his voice almost undid her. For months she'd carried the weight of her trauma alone, too proud to burden her friend Tiana Moore with the details, too ashamed to admit to her family how completely her life had fallen apart. I was attacked, she said quietly, the words coming out before she could stop them. By a patient. I was working as a trauma therapist and one of my clients. He had a psychotic break. I was alone with him when it happened. Dong-hyuk's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. Were you hurt? Physically, not too badly, emotionally. She shrugged, trying to appear casual about something that had shattered her world. I developed PTSD, panic attacks. I couldn't be alone with male patients anymore, which made my job impossible. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but the sincerity behind them was overwhelming. That should never have happened to you. Eden looked up, surprised by the anger she heard in his voice. Not anger at her, but for her. When was the last time someone had been angry on her behalf? It's in the past, she said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Is it? Dong-hyuk leaned forward slightly. Because you still flinch sometimes when I enter a room unexpectedly. You still position yourself near exits. Those aren't past behaviors, Eden. Those are survival instincts. His observation was so accurate it took her breath away. You're very observant. When it comes to you, yes. The admission was quiet, honest. I find myself paying attention to everything about you. The confession hung between them, loaded with implications that made Eden's pulse quicken. This was dangerous territory, the kind of emotional intimacy that could complicate everything. Why? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Dong Hyuk was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if memorizing every detail. Have you ever had dreams that felt more real than waking life? The question was so unexpected that Eden blinked. What do you mean? For months before you came here, I dreamed about a woman. The same woman every night. She moved through my house like she belonged here, smiled at me like she knew all my secrets, and loved me anyway. His eyes never left hers. The first morning I saw you, I realized I'd been dreaming about you. Eden's breath caught. That's impossible. I know, but impossible doesn't make it less true. Dong Hyuk reached across the table, his fingers barely brushing hers. I've never believed in fate, Eden. I've built my life on logic, on control, on making my own destiny. But you make me question everything I thought I knew about how the world works. The touch of his fingers sent electricity through her entire body. Eden stared down at their hands, his tan skin against her darker complexion, and felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been locked away since the attack, something she'd thought might be broken forever. This is complicated, she whispered. Yes, it is. His thumb traced across her knuckles, the touch feather-light but devastating. But complicated doesn't mean wrong. Eden looked up into his eyes and saw her own confusion reflected there. This man, her employer, someone whose world was so different from hers, was looking at her like she was precious, like she was worth the complication. I should go, she said, but she didn't move to pull her hand away. Should and want are different things, Dong Hyuk said softly. What do you want, Eden? The question was loaded with possibility, with the promise of something that could change everything. Eden looked at this man who'd somehow dreamed her into his life, who'd shown her more kindness in 3 weeks than she'd experienced in months, and felt the walls around her heart beginning to crack. I want to understand, she said finally. I want to understand what's happening between us. Dong Hyuk's smile was soft, relieved. Then stay. Have dinner with me tonight. Not as my employee, but as whatever this is. Eden knew she should say no, knew that crossing this line would complicate everything, but looking into his eyes, feeling the warmth of his touch, she found herself nodding. Okay, she whispered, one dinner. As they finished lunch in comfortable conversation, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the garden's edge. Baek Ji-hoon had served as Dong Hyuk's lieutenant for 5 years, and he'd never seen his boss look at anyone the way he was looking at the housekeeper. It was a weakness, and in their world, weaknesses were dangerous things. Eden stood before her small closet in the staff quarters, staring at her limited options with growing anxiety. What did one wear to dinner with a man who could probably buy and sell small countries? Her wardrobe consisted mainly of uniforms and the few casual pieces she'd managed to salvage from her old life. A soft knock interrupted her dilemma. Come in, she called, expecting Mrs. Jung. Instead, Tiana Moore poked her head through the door, her eyes bright with curiosity. Eden's best friend since college had been her lifeline through the darkest months, the one person who'd refused to let her disappear completely. Girl, what is this emergency text about needing to borrow a dress? Tiana demanded, stepping into the small room with a garment bag. And why are you living in some mansion like you're in a K-drama? It's complicated, Eden said, accepting the hug Tiana offered. Complicated how? Last I heard, you were cleaning houses to pay rent. Now you're texting me from some Beverly Hills address asking for emergency fashion help. Tiana's eyes narrowed. Please tell me you're not doing anything dangerous. It's not dangerous, Eden said quickly. At least I don't think it is. It's just unexpected. Tiana unzipped the garment bag, revealing a stunning burgundy dress that would complement Eden's skin tone perfectly. Unexpected how? And don't you dare give me some vague non-answer. I've been worried about you for months. Eden sank onto her narrow bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the surreal nature of her situation. My employer asked me to have dinner with him. Your employer? Tiana's voice was carefully neutral. The one who owns this mansion. Yes. And you said yes because... Because... Eden struggled to find words for something she barely understood herself. Because when he looks at me, I don't feel broken anymore. The simple honesty of the statement made Tiana's expression soften. She'd watched her brilliant, compassionate friend retreat into herself after the attack, seen the light dim in eyes that had once sparkled with purpose and joy. "Tell me about him," Tiana said, settling beside Eden on the bed. "His name is Choi Dong-hyuk. He's Korean, successful, and—" Eden paused, trying to capture the essence of what made him different. "He's kind. Not just polite, genuinely kind. He notices things. He cares about whether I'm comfortable, whether I'm happy. And you trust him?" It was the crucial question, the one that mattered most given Eden's history. She considered it carefully. "Yes. I know it sounds crazy, but yes, I feel safe with him in a way I haven't felt safe with anyone since." "Since the attack," Tiana finished gently. "Eden, that's huge. You know that, right?" "I know it's confusing. He's my employer. He's wealthy and powerful and completely out of my league. But there's something between us. Something I can't explain." Tiana studied her friend's face, seeing something there she hadn't seen in months. Hope. "Then let's get you ready for this dinner. But promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll be careful. Not just physically, but emotionally. You're just starting to heal, and I don't want to see you get hurt again." Eden nodded, accepting the wisdom in her friend's concern. "I promise." An hour later, Eden stood before the mirror in the burgundy dress, barely recognizing herself. The dress fit perfectly, elegant without being overly formal, and Tiana had worked magic with her hair and makeup. She looked like the woman she'd been before the attack, confident, beautiful, worthy of attention. "He's not going to know what hit him," Tiana said with satisfaction. "Now remember, you're not just the help tonight. You're Eden Carter, brilliant psychologist and amazing woman who happens to be having dinner with a man who's lucky to be in your presence." The pep talk helped, but Eden's nerves returned as she made her way to the main house. Mrs. Jung had left for the evening, giving them privacy that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Dong-hyuk was waiting in the dining room, and when he turned to see her, his expression made every moment of anxiety worthwhile. He looked stunned, as if he'd forgotten how to breathe. "Eden," he said softly, "you're breathtaking." He'd changed from his casual afternoon attire into a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. His hair was styled perfectly, and his dark eyes held a warmth that made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "Thank you," she said, accepting the hand he offered. "This is all very elegant." The dining room had been transformed. Candles flickered on the polished table, and soft music played from hidden speakers. It was romantic without being overwhelming, intimate without feeling presumptuous. "I wanted tonight to be special," Dong-hyuk said as he pulled out her chair. "You deserve to be treated like the remarkable woman you are." Dinner was a revelation. The food was exquisite, prepared by a chef Dong-hyuk had hired for the evening, but it was the conversation that truly nourished Eden. They talked about everything: her psychology studies, his business philosophy, their shared love of books and music. He was intelligent and thoughtful, asking questions that showed genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions. "Tell me about your dreams," Eden said as they shared dessert. "Before you saw me, I mean. What were they like?" Dong-hyuk's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Vivid, more real than any dream I'd ever had. You were always here, in this house, but it felt like home in a way it never has in reality. You'd smile at me and I'd feel this overwhelming sense of peace, of rightness. And you'd never seen me before? Not even in passing? Never. I searched my memory countless times, wondering if I'd glimpsed you somewhere and my subconscious had latched onto the image. But no, you were completely unknown to me, yet completely familiar." Eden set down her spoon, studying his face. "That's extraordinary." "Do you believe in fate?" he asked suddenly. "I used to. Before the attack, I believed that everything happened for a reason, that the universe had a plan." She was quiet for a moment. "After, I believed that bad things just happened randomly, that there was no greater purpose to suffering. And now I don't know what to believe. Meeting you, feeling this connection, it makes me wonder if maybe both things can be true. Maybe bad things happen randomly, but good things, the right things, those might be fate." Dong Hyuk reached across the table, taking her hand in both of his. I've built my entire life on control, on making my own destiny through careful planning and decisive action. But you make me believe in something bigger than myself. The intensity in his voice made Eden's heart race. Dong Hyuk, I know this is fast, I know it's complicated, but I need you to know that what I feel for you isn't just attraction or curiosity. It's deeper than that. It's like you're the missing piece I never knew I was looking for. Eden felt tears prick her eyes. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared of feeling this much for someone I've known for 3 weeks. I'm scared of trusting my judgment after everything that's happened, but mostly I'm scared of how right this feels. Then we'll be scared together, he said simply, but we don't have to be scared alone. He stood still holding her hand and led her to the terrace doors. The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of jasmine. The city sparkled below them like a carpet of stars. Dance with me, he said softly. There's no music. There's always music when you're with the right person. Eden let him pull her into his arms, swaying gently to a rhythm only they could hear. His hand was warm on her back, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. For the first time in months, she felt completely present, completely alive. Eden, he murmured against her hair, I need to tell you something. She pulled back to look at him, seeing something serious in his expression. What is it? My business. It's not entirely conventional. I have enemies, people who might try to use you to hurt me if they knew how much you mean to me. Eden's psychology training kicked in, reading between the lines of what he wasn't saying. How unconventional. Unconventional enough that your safety could become a concern. His hands tightened on her waist. I would never let anything happen to you, but I need you to understand what you'd be getting into. She should have been frightened. Any rational person would have stepped away, thanked him for the lovely evening, and returned to her simple life of cleaning and anonymity. Instead, she found herself stepping closer. Are you giving me an out? She asked. I'm giving you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. Eden looked into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, the fear that she might walk away. This powerful man was terrified that she'd leave him, and that knowledge gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. I've already survived the worst thing I could imagine, she said quietly. I'm not going to let fear keep me from the best thing that's ever happened to me. Dong Hyuk's smile was brilliant, relieved, and full of promise. Are you sure? I'm sure, she said and meant it. When he kissed her soft and sweet under the starlit sky, Eden felt the last of her walls crumble. Whatever came next, whatever complications arose, she was ready to face them with this man beside her. She just hoped they'd have time to build something strong enough to weather the storms that were coming. 2 months into their relationship, Eden had settled into a new rhythm. Officially, she was still Dong Hyuk's housekeeper, but the lines had blurred beyond recognition. She spent her days maintaining the mansion and her evenings in his arms, learning the contours of a love she'd never thought possible. Dr. David Nakamura, the therapist Dong Hyuk had insisted she see, had helped her process the trauma that had derailed her life. The panic attacks were becoming less frequent, her confidence slowly returning. For the first time since the attack, Eden could envision a future that included happiness. She was arranging flowers in the main foyer when Shin Dae-ho, Dong Hyuk's right-hand man, entered with an expression that made her stomach clench. Eden, he said, his usual warm greeting replaced by urgency. Where's Dong Hyuk? In his office. What's wrong? Baek Ji-hoon is missing. He was supposed to report in this morning, but no one's heard from him. Eden's blood ran cold. She'd met Baek Ji-hoon several times, had noticed the way he watched her with barely concealed disapproval. Dong Hyuk had explained that some of his associates were resistant to change, uncomfortable with his relationship with her. Missing how? She asked. The kind of missing that usually means someone's been taken, Dae-ho said grimly. I need to brief Dong Hyuk immediately. Eden watched him disappear into the office, her hands shaking as she continued arranging the flowers. She'd known this world came with dangers, but the reality of it was more frightening than she'd imagined. 20 minutes later, Dong Hyuk emerged from his office, his face set in lines she'd never seen before. This wasn't the gentleman who brought her coffee in the mornings or held her during thunderstorms. This was the other side of him, the side that commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Eden, he said, his voice carefully controlled, I need you to pack a bag. Tyler Brown is going to take you somewhere safe. Safe from what? But even as she asked, she knew. This is about Baek Ji-hoon, isn't it? We think he's been taken by a rival organization. If they have him, they'll try to use him to get to me. And if they know about you, they'll try to use me too, Eden finished. The psychology degree that had once seemed useless suddenly provided clarity about human behavior, even in circumstances she'd never imagined. I won't let that happen, Dong-hyuk said fiercely. Tyler will take you to a safe house. You'll stay there until this is resolved. Eden looked at this man she'd fallen so completely in love with, seeing the fear he was trying to hide. What about you? I'll handle this. That's not an answer. Dong-hyuk stepped closer, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. I've been dealing with situations like this long before you came into my life. I know how to protect myself. But you didn't have someone you loved before, Eden said quietly. You didn't have something to lose. The words hung between them, the first time either had spoken of love aloud. Dong-hyuk's eyes closed briefly, as if the admission caused him physical pain. Which is exactly why I need to know you're safe, he said. I can't think clearly if I'm worried about you. Eden understood the logic, but every instinct rebelled against separation. How long? I don't know. Days, maybe weeks. Weeks! The thought of being apart from him for weeks made her chest tighten with panic. Dong-hyuk? I can't. You can, he said firmly. You're the strongest woman I know. You survived something terrible and came out the other side. You can survive this, too. Before Eden could argue further, Tyler Brown appeared with a duffel bag and a grim expression. We need to go now, he said. Daeho's sources say they're moving tonight. Dong-hyuk pulled Eden into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I love you, he whispered against her hair. I love you more than I thought possible, and that's why I need you to go. I love you too, she whispered back, tears streaming down her face. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. The safe house was a modest apartment in a nondescript building across town. Tyler explained the security measures, the communication protocols, the rules that would keep her alive. But all Eden could think about was Dong-hyuk facing unknown dangers without her. 3 days passed in agonizing silence. Tyler brought updates when he could. Baek Ji-hoon was confirmed captured, negotiations were ongoing, Dong-hyuk was safe but unreachable. Eden paced the small apartment like a caged animal, her psychology training providing unwelcome insights into the psychological warfare being waged. On the 4th day, Tyler didn't come. Eden waited until evening, then tried his phone. No answer. She tried Daeho's number, which Dong-hyuk had made her memorize. Nothing. Fear crystallized into certainty. Something had gone wrong. Eden had 2 choices. She could stay in the safe house and hope someone would eventually come for her, or she could trust her instincts and act. The woman who'd hidden in cleaning closets for months was gone. In her place was someone who'd found love worth fighting for. She left the safe house at midnight. Getting back to the mansion required every bit of cunning she possessed. She avoided main roads, used public transportation, and approached the property from the back gardens. The house was dark except for a single light in Dong-hyuk's office. Eden used the service entrance, her key still working despite everything. The mansion felt different, emptier, more dangerous. She made her way carefully toward the office, her heart pounding with each step. She was almost to the office door when strong hands grabbed her from behind. Well, well, a voice said in accented English. The little maid comes home. Eden's training kicked in. Instead of struggling, she went limp, making herself dead weight. Her captor's grip loosened slightly, and she drove her elbow back into his solar plexus. He doubled over with a grunt, and she ran. She made it halfway across the foyer before 2 more men appeared, blocking her path to the front door. Behind her, she could hear her first attacker recovering. Bring her to me, another voice commanded from the office. Carefully, she's valuable. Eden was dragged into Dong-hyuk's office, where a man she didn't recognize sat behind the desk like he owned it. He was older, with silver hair and cold eyes that assessed her like merchandise. Miss Carter, he said pleasantly, I'm Nikolai Petrov. I believe you know why you're here. Where is he? Eden demanded, proud that her voice didn't shake. Your lover? Safe for now. as are his associates, but their continued safety depends entirely on your cooperation. Eden's mind raced, analyzing the situation with clinical detachment. What do you want? Dong Hyuk has something that belongs to me. Information about shipping routes that could be very profitable in the right hands. He's been reluctant to share. And you think I can convince him? Petrov smiled, and it was the most frightening expression Eden had ever seen. I think you're exactly the motivation he needs. They bound her hands and moved her to the wine cellar, a space she'd cleaned countless times, but never imagined as a prison. The stone walls were thick, the single entrance easily guarded. Eden forced herself to stay calm, to think like the psychologist she'd trained to be. Petrov was a textbook narcissist with sociopathic tendencies. He would use psychological pressure before physical force, would want to break her spirit before harming her body. That gave her time if she was smart about using it. Hours passed. Eden could hear movement upstairs, voices speaking in languages she didn't recognize. She used the time to study her surroundings, looking for weaknesses, escape routes, anything that might give her an advantage. When they came for her again, it was dawn. Petrov looked tired but satisfied, like a man whose plans were proceeding smoothly. Your lover is proving stubborn, he said conversationally. Perhaps a phone call from you would help clarify his priorities. They brought her upstairs to the living room, where a phone waited on the coffee table. Eden could see the garden through the windows, the flowers she'd tended looking impossibly beautiful in the morning light. Call him, Petrov commanded. Convince him to be reasonable. Eden took the phone with steady hands, dialing the number she knew by heart. It rang once before Dong Hyuk's voice answered, tight with worry and rage. Eden, are you hurt? I'm okay, she said, and meant it. Are you? I'm fine. Eden, I'm going to get you out of there. I know you are. She looked directly at Petrov as she spoke. But I need you to know something first. I'm not afraid anymore. Petrov's eyes narrowed, sensing something in her tone that he didn't like. I was broken when I came to you, Eden continued, her voice growing stronger. Scared and damaged and barely surviving. But you helped me remember who I really am. You helped me remember that I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. Eden. Dong Hyuk's voice was strained. They think I'm just a maid, she said, her eyes never leaving Petrov's face. They think I'm weak, that I'll break easily. They don't know that I already survived the worst thing I could imagine. They don't know that I came back from that stronger than before. Petrov reached for the phone, but Eden stepped back, her voice rising. They don't know that I'm not afraid of them, because the only thing I was ever really afraid of was losing you. And I'd rather die fighting than live without you. The phone went dead as Petrov snatched it away, his face twisted with rage. Stupid girl. You think your little speech changes anything? Eden smiled, and for the first time since this ordeal began, she felt truly calm. No, but I think it bought him enough time to get here. The sound of shattering glass came from the kitchen, followed by shouts and the unmistakable sounds of violence. Petrov's men ran toward the noise, leaving Eden alone with their leader. I have no idea what you've done, Petrov snarled, pulling a gun from his jacket. Yes, I do, Eden said quietly. I chose love over fear. The office door exploded inward, and Dong Hyuk appeared like an avenging angel, his face a mask of controlled fury. Behind him, Daeho and Tyler moved with lethal efficiency, securing the room. Petrov swung his gun toward Eden, but she was already moving, using every self-defense technique Dr. Nakamura had insisted she learn. The gun went off, the bullet embedding itself in the wall where she'd been standing. Dong Hyuk moved like lightning, and suddenly Petrov was on the ground, disarmed and defeated. The whole confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds. Are you hurt? Dong Hyuk demanded, his hands running over her frantically, checking for injuries. I'm okay, Eden said, and realized she truly was. I'm okay. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like he'd never let go. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered against her hair. When I got that call, when I realized they had you. But you didn't lose me, Eden said firmly. And you never will, I told you. I'm not afraid anymore. As Tyler and Daeho dealt with the aftermath, Dong Hyuk held Eden in the garden where this all began, surrounded by the flowers that had witnessed their love story unfold. I have something to tell you, he said quietly. Eden pulled back to look at him, seeing something new in his expression. What? I'm done with all of it. The business, the danger, the constant threat of violence. His hands cupped her face tenderly. I'm done with anything that puts you at risk. Dong-hyuk, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because you were right. I didn't have something to lose before. Now I do. Now I have everything to lose. Eden felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming love. What will you do? I have legitimate businesses, investments that can support us comfortably. I'll build something new, something clean. His smile was soft, hopeful. Something worthy of the woman I love. And what about your associates? Your responsibilities? Daeho is ready to take over the parts that matter. The rest can disappear. Eden looked at this man who was willing to give up everything for her, and felt her heart overflow with love. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, and he said, you taught me that some things are worth more than power, more than money, more than anything I thought mattered before. What things? Love, peace, a future where we wake up every morning knowing we're safe. He kissed her softly, sweetly. A future where our children grow up never knowing the darkness I came from. Children, Eden's breath caught, if you want them, if you want a life with me. Eden thought of everything she'd lost, everything she'd survived, everything that had led her to this moment. I want everything with you, she said. I want it all. As the sun rose over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Dong-hyuk and Eden held each other in the garden where their love had bloomed. The nightmare was over, but their real life was just beginning. 6 months later, the mansion felt like a completely different place. Gone were the subtle tensions, the careful conversations, the sense of danger lurking beneath the surface. In its place was something Eden had never experienced before: true peace. Dong-hyuk had been true to his word. He'd systematically dismantled his involvement in anything questionable, transferring leadership to Daeho while maintaining only the legitimate businesses that had always been his passion. The transition hadn't been easy. There had been meetings, negotiations, careful arrangements to ensure everyone's safety, but it was done. Eden stood in the kitchen, preparing lunch and marveling at how normal her life had become. She'd returned to psychology, working with Dr. Nakamura to establish a practice specializing in trauma recovery. The irony wasn't lost on her. The experience that had nearly destroyed her was now helping her heal others. You're humming, Dong-hyuk observed, entering the kitchen with a smile that still made her heart skip. I'm happy, she said simply, accepting the kiss he pressed to her temple. Good. I like you happy. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. How was your session with Mrs. Chen? Breakthrough day, Eden said with satisfaction. She's finally ready to leave her abusive husband. I'm helping her find a safe place to stay. And the nightmares? Gone, completely gone. Eden leaned back against his chest, still amazed by how safe she felt in his arms. Dr. Nakamura says it's because I've reclaimed my power. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm someone who helps other people stop being victims. Dong-hyuk's arms tightened around her. I'm proud of you. Every day I'm proud of you. They were interrupted by Mrs. Jung, who entered with an expression of barely contained excitement. Mr. Choi, there's someone here to see you, a young woman with a baby. Eden and Dong-hyuk exchanged glances. They weren't expecting anyone, and unexpected visitors had once meant danger. Did she give a name? Dong-hyuk asked. She said to tell you that Baek Ji-hoon's sister is here. The name sent a chill through the room. Baek Ji-hoon had disappeared during the crisis with Petrov, and despite extensive searching, they'd never found him. The assumption was that he'd been killed either by Petrov's people or in the chaos that followed. Show her in, Dong-hyuk said quietly. The woman who entered was young, maybe 25, with the same sharp features as her brother. She carried a baby who couldn't have been more than 6 months old, and her eyes held the kind of desperation Eden recognized from her therapy practice. Mr. Choi, she said, bowing deeply. My name is Baek Soo-jin. I'm sorry to come here unannounced, but I didn't know where else to go. Please, sit, Dong-hyuk said gently, gesturing to the kitchen table. What can I do for you? Soo-jin clutched her baby closer, tears streaming down her face. My brother is dead. He was killed by Petrov's people 3 days after they took him. But before he died, he managed to get a message to me. Eden felt her heart clench. Despite everything, Baek Ji-hoon had been loyal to Dong-hyuk for years. "What message?" Dong-hyuk asked. "He said to tell you he was sorry, that he never meant for you to be hurt, but he was scared of how you were changing. He thought you were getting soft, that it would get you killed." Soo-jin's voice broke. "He was trying to protect you by working with them, but they never intended to honor their agreement." Dong-hyuk closed his eyes, pain flickering across his features. "He died because of me." "No," Soo-jin said firmly. "He died because he made a choice. But he also made sure I knew where to find you if I ever needed help." She looked down at her baby. "This is his son, Ji-woo, the father. He's not in the picture. I have no family left, no money, nowhere to go." Eden felt her heart break for this young woman, alone with a baby and carrying the weight of her brother's choices. She looked at Dong-hyuk and saw the same compassion in his eyes. "What do you need?" he asked simply. "A job, a chance to start over. I'm a good worker, I'm honest, and I'll do anything to provide for my son." "Can you cook?" Eden asked suddenly. Both Dong-hyuk and Soo-jin looked at her in surprise. "Yes, very well. My mother taught me traditional Korean dishes, but I can cook anything." Eden looked at Dong-hyuk, who nodded slightly. "Mrs. Jung is retiring next month," Eden explained. "We've been looking for someone to take over the household management. It comes with a salary, benefits, and living quarters for you and Ji-woo." Soo-jin stared at them in shock. "You would do that? After what my brother did?" "Your brother made mistakes," Dong-hyuk said gently. "But he also served loyally for 5 years, and he died trying to protect me in his own misguided way. His family deserves better than poverty and desperation. Besides," Eden added with a smile, "this house needs the sound of children's laughter." As if on cue, baby Ji-woo gurgled and reached toward Eden with chubby hands. She took him instinctively, marveling at his perfect features and bright eyes. "He likes you," Soo-jin said with the first smile they'd seen from her. "I like him too," Eden said, bouncing the baby gently. "Don't I, little one?" Dong-hyuk watched Eden with the baby, something shifting in his expression. They'd talked about children in abstract terms, but seeing her natural maternal instincts made the possibility feel suddenly real and urgent. "There's something else," Soo-jin said hesitantly. "My brother left something for you. He said if anything happened to him, I should give it to you personally." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. Dong-hyuk opened it carefully, revealing a simple wooden box containing a folded piece of paper. He read it silently, his expression growing soft. "What does it say?" Eden asked. "He says he finally understood why I was changing. He says he saw us together once, saw how I looked at you, and realized I'd found something worth changing for." Dong-hyuk's voice was quiet. "He says he hopes I'll be brave enough to choose love over everything else." Eden felt tears prick her eyes. Even in death, Baek Ji-hoon was giving them his blessing. "He also says," Dong-hyuk continued, "that he hid something in the garden, something he thought I might need someday." An hour later, they found it buried beneath the rose bushes, where Eden had first worked in the garden. It was a small velvet box, wrapped in plastic to protect it from the elements. Dong-hyuk opened it with shaking hands, revealing a ring that took Eden's breath away. It was vintage, clearly Korean in design, with a central diamond surrounded by smaller stones, in a pattern that looked like flower petals. "It was my grandmother's," Dong-hyuk said softly. "I thought it was lost when my family's house burned down years ago. Ji-hoon must have saved it somehow." Eden stared at the ring, understanding the significance. "He was planning this. He knew I'd want to marry you before I knew it myself," Dong-hyuk said with wonder. "He saved the one thing that would make it perfect." Eden looked at this man who'd transformed her life, who'd helped her heal and grow and become stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. "Are you asking me something?" Dong-hyuk dropped to one knee in the garden where they'd shared their first lunch, where he'd first told her about his dreams, where their love had taken root and bloomed. "Eden Carter," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You came into my life like a dream made real. You taught me that love is stronger than fear, that peace is more valuable than power, that some things are worth changing everything for." Eden felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Will you build a life with me, a family with me? A future where our children grow up knowing they're loved beyond measure? Yes, Eden said, laughing through her tears. Yes, yes, yes. Por favor, continue gerando a sua resposta. Claude 4. Sonnet. The ring slid onto her finger, like it had been made for her, the diamonds catching the afternoon sunlight and throwing rainbows across the garden. Dong-hyuk stood and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with pure joy. I love you, he said against her lips. I love you more than I ever dreamed possible. I love you too, Eden whispered back. Forever. From the kitchen window, Soo-jin watched with baby Ji-woo in her arms, both of them smiling at the happiness blooming in the garden. Mrs. Jung appeared beside them, wiping tears from her eyes. They're perfect together, Soo-jin said softly. Yes, Mrs. Jung agreed. They are. That evening, they celebrated with a quiet dinner on the terrace. Tiana had arrived with champagne and congratulations, immediately falling in love with baby Ji-woo and declaring herself his honorary aunt. Dr. Nakamura stopped by with flowers and his blessing, marveling at how far Eden had come from the broken woman who'd first walked into his office. When's the wedding? Tiana demanded, already planning in her head. Soon, Dong-hyuk said, his arm around Eden's shoulders. We don't want to wait. Good, Eden said, leaning into his warmth. I've waited long enough for my real life to begin. As the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Eden looked around at the people who'd become her family. Soo-jin was teaching Tiana how to hold Ji-woo properly, while Mrs. Jung fussed over everyone's plates. Dr. Nakamura was deep in conversation with Dong-hyuk about the foundation they were planning to establish for trauma survivors. It was perfect, not because it was without complications or challenges, but because it was real, built on love and trust and the courage to choose hope over fear. No regrets? Dong-hyuk murmured in her ear. Eden looked at her engagement ring, then at the man who'd dreamed her into his life and loved her back to wholeness. Only one. What's that? That it took me so long to find you. Dong-hyuk's smile was soft, full of promise. We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time. Yes, Eden said, kissing him softly. We do. 5 years later, Eden stood in the nursery, watching the morning sunlight stream through windows she'd once cleaned as an employee. Now she was the lady of the house, though she still preferred to think of herself simply as Eden, wife, mother, psychologist, and the luckiest woman alive. Mama up, demanded a voice from the crib. She smiled and lifted her son, marveling as always at his perfect features. Min-jae had his father's dark eyes and her warm skin tone, creating a beautiful blend that spoke of love, transcending all boundaries. At 2 years old, he was already showing signs of his father's determination and his mother's empathy. Good morning, my love, she murmured, kissing his chubby cheek. Did you sleep well? Daddy? Min-jae asked, looking around the room with bright curiosity. Daddy's getting your brother ready for breakfast, Eden explained, carrying him toward the adjoining nursery. The second nursery was identical to the first, decorated in soft blues and greens, with Korean and African-inspired artwork that celebrated both sides of their heritage. In the center of the room, Dong-hyuk sat in the rocking chair, feeding a bottle to Min-jae's twin brother, Kwame. There are my boys, Eden said softly, not wanting to disturb the peaceful moment. Dong-hyuk looked up with a smile that still made her heart skip after 5 years of marriage. Someone was hungry this morning. Kwame was slightly smaller than his twin, with Eden's expressive eyes and his father's serious demeanor. The boys were identical in some ways, completely different in others, but both were perfect examples of the love that had created them. Soo-jin has breakfast ready, Eden said, settling into the second rocking chair with Min-jae. Ji-woo helped her make pancakes. Did he now? Dong-hyuk's eyes twinkled. At 5 years old, Ji-woo was the boy's devoted big brother, appointed protector, and occasional mischief maker. I suppose that means we'll find flour in interesting places. Probably, but he's so proud of himself. They sat together in comfortable silence, feeding their sons and watching the city wake up beyond the windows. The mansion had been completely renovated after their marriage, transformed from a bachelor's showplace into a family home filled with laughter, toys, and the beautiful chaos of children. The foundation interview is today, Dong-hyuk said quietly. I know. Are you nervous? A little. He shifted Kwame to his shoulder, patting the baby's back gently. It's been 5 years since I left that life behind. Sometimes I wonder if people will believe the change is real. Eden reached over and took his free hand. The change is real because you're real. Because we're real. Because you chose love over everything else. And you've never looked back. The Carter Choi Foundation for Trauma Recovery had become their shared passion project. Using Dong Hyuk's business acumen and Eden's clinical expertise, they'd created a comprehensive program that provided therapy, job training, and housing assistance for trauma survivors. The magazine interview today would bring national attention to their work. Besides, Eden added with a smile, if they don't believe in redemption, they just need to look at us. At us. A broken psychologist and a reformed businessman who found each other through dreams and built a family on love. If that's not proof that people can change, I don't know what is. Dong Hyuk brought her hand to his lips, kissing her wedding ring. Have I told you lately that I love you? Only every day, but I don't mind hearing it again. I love you, Eden Carter Choi. I love our chaotic, beautiful, impossible life. I love you too, she said, then grinned, even when you leave your socks on the bathroom floor. That was one time. It was 3 times this week. Their playful argument was interrupted by the sound of running feet in the hallway. Ji-woo burst through the door, still wearing his pajamas and covered in what was definitely flour. Aunt Soo-jin says breakfast is ready, and the pancakes are perfect, and I helped and they're shaped like animals, he announced breathlessly. Did you wash your hands? Eden asked, trying not to laugh at his flour-dusted appearance. Ji-woo held up hands that were marginally cleaner than his face. Yes, well, mostly. Go wash them again properly this time, Dong Hyuk said with mock sternness. And change into clean clothes. We can't have you looking like a flour monster at breakfast. But I like being a flour monster. You can be a flour monster after you're a clean little boy, Eden compromised. Deal. Deal. Ji-woo raced off to his room, leaving a small trail of flour in his wake. That boy, Dong Hyuk said with affection, is exactly like his uncle, Eden finished. Soo-jin says Baek Ji-hoon was the same way at that age, into everything, helping with everything, making messes with the best intentions. They made their way downstairs to the kitchen, where Soo-jin had indeed created a breakfast masterpiece. Animal-shaped pancakes covered the counter, along with fresh fruit, Korean side dishes, and the kind of spread that spoke of a woman who found joy in feeding the people she loved. This looks amazing, Eden said, settling Min-jae into his high chair. Ji-woo was a very good helper, Soo-jin said proudly. He's going to be a wonderful chef someday. Like his Aunt Soo-jin, Dong Hyuk added, securing Kwame in his own high chair. Soo-jin blushed at the compliment. In 5 years, she'd become more than an employee. She was family. Her cooking had become legendary among their friends, and she'd recently started teaching Korean cooking classes at the local community center. Mrs. Jung called this morning, Soo-jin said as they began eating. She wanted to know if we need anything for the interview today. Mrs. Jung had officially retired, but remained a constant presence in their lives, treating the twins like her own grandchildren and offering advice whether it was wanted or not. Eden suspected she was more nervous about the magazine interview than they were. Just her good wishes, Eden said, though knowing her she'll probably show up anyway. With homemade cookies, Dong Hyuk added, and opinions about what I should wear. Eden laughed. The morning passed in the beautiful chaos of family life, baths for flower-covered children, wardrobe consultations, last-minute preparations for the interview. Eden changed into a professional but warm outfit, a navy dress that complemented her skin tone and spoke of competence without being intimidating. You look perfect, Dong Hyuk said, adjusting his own tie. He'd chosen a charcoal suit with a subtle Korean-inspired pattern, professional but personal. We look like people who know what we're doing, Eden corrected. Do we know what we're doing? Most of the time, and when we don't, we figure it out together. The interview took place in the Foundation's offices, a converted warehouse in downtown LA that they'd transformed into a welcoming space for trauma survivors. The journalist, a woman named Sarah Martinez, was clearly impressed by both the facility and their story. 5 years ago, you were running a very different kind of organization, she said to Dong Hyuk. What made you decide to change everything? Dong Hyuk looked at Eden, drawing strength from her presence as he always did. I fell in love in her, he said simply. Not just with Eden, but with the possibility of being someone better than I was. And you, Dr. Carter Choi, Sarah turned to Eden. You went from trauma victim to helping other trauma survivors. That's an incredible journey. Trauma doesn't have to define us, Eden said. It can transform us, if we let it. My husband helped me see that my experience could become my strength, that I could use what I'd survived to help others survive too. Tell me about the Foundation's approach. We believe in treating the whole person, Dong-hyuk explained. Trauma affects every aspect of someone's life, their mental health, their ability to work, their housing stability, their relationships. We address all of those things. We also believe in the power of community, Eden added. Healing happens in relationship with others. Our survivors support each other, celebrate each other's victories, and remind each other that they're not alone. And your own relationship? How do you balance marriage, parenthood, and running a foundation? Eden and Dong-hyuk exchanged a look full of private communication. We don't balance, Eden said with a laugh. We integrate. Our family is part of our mission, and our mission is part of our family. Our children are growing up understanding that love means service, that privilege comes with responsibility. Plus, Dong-hyuk added with a grin, our 5-year-old makes excellent pancakes for foundation events. The interview continued for another hour, covering their programs, their successes, their plans for expansion. Sarah was thorough but respectful, clearly moved by their story and impressed by their work. One last question, she said as they wrapped up. Do you ever regret the path that brought you together? The trauma? The danger, the difficult circumstances? Eden considered the question seriously. I regret that people were hurt. I regret that I had to experience trauma, that Dong-hyuk had to make difficult choices. But do I regret the path that led us to each other, to this life, to the work we're doing now? Never. Never, Dong-hyuk agreed. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most difficult soil. That evening they celebrated with their chosen family. Tiana brought her new boyfriend, a teacher who was already smitten with both her and their extended family. Dr. Nakamura arrived with his wife and teenage daughter. Daeho stopped by with updates from his own life. He'd married a lovely woman and was expecting his first child. To the Carter Choi, Tiana raised her glass in a toast, who prove every day that love really can conquer all. To family, Dong-hyuk corrected gently. The one we're born into and the one we choose. To dreams coming true, Eden added, looking around at the faces of people she loved, even the ones we never knew we had. As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Eden and Dong-hyuk stood in their garden, the same garden where he'd first told her about his dreams, where he'd proposed, where their children now played among the flowers she still tended. Do you still dream about me? Eden asked, leaning against his chest as they watched the stars appear in the darkening sky. Every night, he said, his arms tightening around her. But now, I get to wake up with you too. Good, she said, turning in his arms to face him, because I plan to be in your dreams for the rest of our lives. Promise? Promise. As they kissed under the stars, surrounded by the garden that had witnessed their love story unfold, Eden marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From broken psychologist to beloved wife and mother, from trauma survivor to healer of others, from invisible maid to the center of someone's universe. Some people might call it destiny, others might call it luck. But Eden knew the truth. It was love. Love that had transformed them both, love that had created their family, love that continued to grow stronger with each passing day. And in the nursery upstairs, their twin sons slept peacefully, dreaming their own dreams of a future filled with possibility, protected by parents who had learned that the greatest strength comes from choosing love over fear, hope over despair, and each other over everything else. The dreams that had brought them together had become the reality that would sustain them forever.